All right, good evening. Today is Monday, February 24th, 2025, and this is the Historic Preservation Commission. And we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wilt.
Present.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Bokamp.
Here.
Commissioner Berg. Here. Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Whitten.
Here.
And Chair Haley.
Here. Thank you very much. And I was going to say, too, we have a new commissioner, and if you touch the button when it's on your microphone, when you want to talk, it'll turn green, and then when you don't want it, you can turn it off. That's one thing I forgot to tell you earlier. So, because we'll be doing voting really quick. So, we have our approval of our agenda for this evening. So if you saw the agenda, if you have any changes or comments, otherwise we can have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then we have approval for posting locations. It's something we do every beginning of the year, usually in January, but since this is our first meeting. Do we need to go over that, or is it just making sure that everyone noted that?
The posting areas, yeah, you do have to make a motion to
Right.
approve
Well, I'm just saying,
it.
do we have to go over it, or?
You don't
is
have
that
to go
just-
over it
okay.
unless there's any questions or comments.
Perfect. So if anyone has any questions about where meetings and times are posted around the city and online, otherwise we can have a motion to approve.
There weren't any new additions to posting locations, were there?
No.
Okay. I'll make a motion then to approve the posting locations.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Then we have election of officers this year, so chair and vice chair. So currently, that's Commissioner Berg and me. As always, I'm very happy for someone else to do chair. But
I've been vice chair, I think this will be my third year now. I'm happy to continue as vice chair or to pass the baton if somebody would be interested in that. Sounds like Linda's also happy to pass the baton for chair if somebody's interested. So
I think the two of you are doing a fine job, and I would make a motion to approve both of you in the same positions moving forward.
I would second.
all right. Should we do a roll call for that, or can we just do voice vote? Okay. And we had a second. So all those in favor of retaining Vice Chair Berg and Chair Haley,
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
and all those opposed? All right. And then any public comments that are not on our agenda this evening? We have one. Yep. And if you'll just state your name and city of residence or work for us, for the record.
There, green light. Perfect. Sorry.
Oh, you're great.
Eric Hartranft, work address is 950 Spruce Street here in Louisville. And I'm here tonight just to give you guys a heads up. We're going to be coming at you with the grain elevator. I've been involved, I've been talking about the project since 2010, became involved as an owner in 2013, and I have a new partner in the redevelopment for this project, and we're moving it forward. We have a user, and so we're really excited about it. It's a very challenging project. If you know anything about it, I know some of you have been through the building and know it well, and I'm happy to take anybody through and show you what we're planning when the time is right. But basically, there's 3 properties in the Louisville Mill Site subdivision that we subdivided in 2015. We're only dealing with the center portion, which is what we call Lot 2 and the outlot. And so we're going to be redeveloping this and going through a PUD process. We have an approved PUD from 2015, which we're amending. There's not going to be a big change to what we had approved, although I think something that's better for historic preservation. We're not going to fill in the porte cochere. We'll build the porte cochere, but it'll be open to the wagon ramp the way it was originally built. So that's going to be a nice feature on the building when we get done. So we'll be bringing it forward and showing you everything that's going on. The concept is really exciting. I'm going to bring up Ross Bowdy. He is my new partner. There's a couple of LLCs involved, one for the ownership of the building that I'm involved with, and then one for the actual business that will be located in there. And I'm going to let Ross talk about that a little bit. So, here's a rendering from about 1905 of what we're going to do to the building. It's basically what it is.
And if you'll just state your name and city of residence or work.
Will do. My name is Ross Bowdy. I'm a resident here in Louisville, and I am here tonight representing the new group of ownership that is coming alongside to get this project done. We are very, very excited. We're all local business owners and residents that are wanting to give this space back to the city and make it a space that people can use. I've spent a lot of time inside of it over the last few months as we've been starting this process, and it's really fun to dream about how to get people into there and see all the cool parts of that building, while making it a usable space that people can take advantage of and have fun. We've already got a business that's ready to rock and go if we can get the whole build going, and so we're going to come back with a lot of information over the next few months and look forward to having a conversation with you guys about how we can partner, make this beautiful piece of our city come back to a vibrant and fun part of what we are as a city. So much more to come on details on that, but we're very, very excited to be a part of the project. So thank you for your time tonight.
That's great. Thank you.
There's a little bit of time left. I do want to just say that one of our major goals is to get people inside of that building. And so the grain yard business that is food and beverage basically will have seating and bar and all the great stuff. But we're also hoping that we're going to be able to partner with the city, maybe the museum somehow, to activate parts of the building that will be off limits to the public typically, but are so cool. Down in the basement and then up in the head house where all the gears and chutes and ladders and above the grain bins, all that stuff is just super cool. So it will take some additional funding that can't really go into a pro forma, but something that we're going to be talking to you and the city about as we develop this. So really excited about this. Again, been working on it for a long time, and we're finally at hopefully the starting gate. We all know that's going to take a lot of money. I mean, that's just so we're going to be at a go, no-go decision once we figure out what funding is available. The rent that the tenant will pay is only going to finance so much of a project like this. So we'll come with details on all of that, but it's challenging. But I think partnering together, we can all bring this to fruition. So we're excited. Thanks.
Thank you for coming tonight. All right, any other public comments that are not on our agenda? And we don't have any online, do we? Okay. All right, our first hearing is 509 Lafarge Avenue. This is for landmark alteration certificate and grants, and we'll have a staff report.
Good evening, Commission members. This is Emily Klein-Gibson, Planner 2, with the staff presentation. This is an application request for landmarking, alteration certificates, and grants at 509 Lafarge Avenue. This property is located on the southern end of Lafarge Avenue and parallels Jefferson Avenue to the west and Roosevelt Avenue to the east. For some conditions over time, the photo on the left shows the house from the 1948 assessor's card. The image in the center shows the house in the 1960s and 70s. And the images on the far right are present-day photos of the property. The building has maintained much of its original footprint, aside from an addition that was constructed in the rear after 1943, and the front porch, which was constructed between 1948 and 1960. So to review this property against our landmarking criteria, the building was constructed around 1910, satisfying the 50-year requirement. The building includes a hipped pyramidal roof style, which was a common style in Louisville during this time. The overall building has maintained its physical integrity after being moved from Superior to Louisville in 1943. And the social history for this property includes mining history from the Phillip family, who owned the house from 1910 to 1924, and French immigration history from the Lecomte family, whose family name is proposed to be the historic landmark house name. Along with the landmark application is an alteration certificate application for several items, including removal and replacement of the siding, one side and one rear addition, window replacements and relocation, and some porch repairs. All proposed work is determined by staff to have minimal impact on the historical elements of the building. These are drawings of the existing and proposed east and south elevations of the house that show some of the proposed alteration work, including removal and replacement of the siding, the placement of the side and rear additions, which shows different siding styles and differentiation from the historic house. These drawings also show the porch repairs and replacement of clad windows with wooden windows. And just to note, the side addition would also include the removal of a side porch roof, which has an unknown date of construction, but is not believed to be original to the house. And here you can see drawings of the existing and proposed north and west elevations, and includes relocation of 3 side windows, along with more details on the siding and the proposed additions. And all of these drawings can be found on attachment 4 in the meeting packet. The application also includes 2 grant requests. One is a preservation and restoration grant request for up to $40,000. The other request is for a new construction grant for up to $15,000. For the preservation and restoration grant, all requested items can be found in Table 1 to the right. Staff has analyzed this against our criteria for preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation, as well as work that was noted in the historic structure assessment. Staff finds that most work qualifies for this grant request, aside from the roof shingles, which staff considers routine maintenance. If the roofing line item were to be removed from the request in the table, the total project cost would still exceed $80,000 and would not result in a lower recommended grant amount. And for the new construction grant, staff found the criteria were met for this grant request, including the maximum height of the addition being below the existing structure. All setbacks would be met, and the FAR would be 24% less than what is allowed by zoning, where a minimum of 10% is required for this specific grant request. So with all of this, staff recommends approval of Resolution 1, Series 2025, recommending approval of the landmark to be named the Lecomte House, approval of Resolution 2, Series 2025, approving the alteration certificate, and approval of Resolution 3, Series 2025, recommending approval of all grants, which would total up to $55,000. And with that concludes the staff presentation. The property owner and the applicant are here, and I'm also available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff?
I'm curious if you know when the rear addition was put onto the house?
I don't know. I believe it was constructed after it was moved to Louisville in 1943.
More curious than anything. I imagine it's probably well within the 50-year landmarking criteria. The shape of the home, the pyramidal is really unique to Superior and Louisville. And you can see in the back that it's been added on to, so I'm just curious if the applicant does know, but it's fine. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll hear from the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you'll just state your name and place of residence or work.
Sure, I'm Eric Weissenberger. My wife, daughter, and I live at 509 Lafarge. My wife and I moved in 2005, and we immediately started planning an addition, which we're coming on our 20th anniversary of that planning. And I think our architect is Peter Stewart. We've worked with him off and on for the better part of 10 years probably. I think a lot of it is due to being intimidated and just financially trying to be in the right place to do it. You know, it's a really interesting house. It's got a lot of character. People who visit like the character a lot. We like it too, but when you live in a house like that, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to it. And what happens is you end up deferring, you know, replacing some windows and things like that because you're working towards this grand plan of doing some kind of renovation. So, you know, we're looking forward to cleaning it up as much as the expansion of the modest expansion of the house, frankly. We love the Old Town and we love the history of Old Town, and we're very honored to be able to preserve the character of the house, especially now since it was moved from Superior. I don't know how many of those houses are left, if any of those. Certainly it's a common history to Louisville and Superior, those mining houses. So it's really cool. We want to preserve it for sure. I don't know if you've got any questions for me. Oh, you mentioned the addition. The only thing I can think of is I think the photo that was shared earlier, I think it might have been like 48. I think it has the addition on it, perhaps. It's those small windows in the far left of the frame. But if you don't have any questions for me, Peter's also here to answer questions.
Hi, Peter Stewart, Stewart Architecture, 1132 Jefferson Avenue, Louisville. Yeah, so it was moved in 43, I believe, and then the assessor's photo was taken in 48, so it was between those two periods. And in the photo, I don't know if you can pull that up, Emily, or should I just scroll here? Additions? Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, the assessor's card, which is the top left picture, you can see in the hip where the roofing changes. So you can see that was a pretty recent addition there. And I will say that, you know, working with Eric in terms of, you know, adding that little bit of new space that they needed, it's like, I think our addition is 450 square feet thereabouts. We did early on we looked at just about every place to put it. The first attempt was to keep the original envelope of the building, so we didn't change any of the side walls and put it on top. But that really took away from that hipped roof scheme that's so prominent or such a crucial kind of architectural element of the building. So that's when we kind of went back and said, well, even though there's not a huge amount of yard space, we decided to put it in the back. That way we could preserve the roof lines. And then the small additions that we are proposing on the south side, we tried to keep those as low as possible to preserve as much roof of the original roof shape as possible. And again, I'm here to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you a few questions, quick? Sorry, getting over something still. Can you speak to the window replacement up front, in particular, on the front? I guess it would be east elevation, and then the windows on either side on the south and north.
Yeah, the south. So the front is the east, facing the street. So the street-facing facade. Those were, Eric, and I'm trying to remember, those were replacement windows done about 15, 20 years ago.
It was the owners before us, I think.
Oh, it was the owners before you.
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
And they're a combination. They're kind of an Anderson clad kind of window, and we want to keep the same openings, but use more historic double hung wood windows.
Would that be a wood exterior window on it too, or?
I'm sorry?
Is that a wood exterior as well, or wood interior with clad exterior?
Oh, no, we've considered wood both sides.
Both
Yeah.
sides?
Yeah,
Okay.
inside, outside. And then on the north side, we're keeping kind of the same number of windows, but we're shifting them a little bit to fit the new interior floor plan. You know, the south side gets a little bit more impact than the others because that's where we kind of propose a little bay that comes out for the kitchen. So that's, of course, all new construction and not part of the historic preservation work, but could be considered part of the new construction work.
My curiosity was mainly the front two double hungs and then the double hungs as you turn the corner. So it's kind of that front adjacent 12 feet.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, all those are the same windows in the same opening. I'm sorry, the new historically accurate windows in the existing window openings.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We got one question regarding the siding. You're proposing to replace the horizontal siding on the original structure, is that right?
Yes.
To match what the 8 or 9 inch profile that's on the front, something typical or similar, is that right? Wider exposure, horizontal siding?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an odd thing, and that was kind of a gesture towards some of the building changes that happened through time. We think the original building, had horizontal lap siding, probably, skinny stuff. And then that was subsequently covered up with asphalt siding that has that kind of brick look or stone look to it. The front, however, was remodeled with that new siding and the new porch added. You can see the pictures from the 60s and 70s. So that's kind of the era that we're going, that we're restoring is from that era, which is more than 50 years old. So it seemed appropriate to keep those same materials there. Yeah, a little bit of a mix up, but I think that's kind of interesting.
And I guess my only comment is just the addition, and obviously these aren't like street, like sidewalk views as far as the perspective, but generally an addition would go straight back, and it looks like it goes out to the side a little bit, and so it's very minimal. So that's the only kind of design piece. We've obviously done it before, and I think the rest of this is so sensitive to the building in general that I'm not concerned about it, but I just want to show that as far as just the new building protruding out from the original. But
So I guess, do we need to discuss landmarking it first before we talk further about the alterations?
well, and this is just with the applicant, so I
Sure,
was just kind
sure,
of pointing
okay.
that out with the applicant to, but
I have a question too, or a comment. On that south elevation where the bump out is, I'm wondering what the reason was that the bump out's right in the middle of the house. Then you have the very back corner has the original style lap siding again instead of the vertical siding. It's given it quite a bit different look to me than what the original was. If I'm seeing this picture correctly, the final foot or so of the building appears to have horizontal siding after the last set of new windows.
are you talking about the proposed south elevation?
Where the bump out is.
Yeah, I think you're reading that right. That would be the southwest corner.
Yeah, southwest corner. So you've got basically the original window in the front of the south elevation staying, and then everything else changing after that first, whatever that is, 9 or 10 feet. And I believe in our parameters, as long as it's the first third of the house stays the same, that's what we're looking at. I'm a little concerned seeing so much different after that first third of the house with that bump out, because you can see the bump out when you walk by. As I walked by it the other day, I was looking at it, and that bump out will be fairly obvious. Whoops. Could that bump out be moved to where that last corner of the house is, where the second set of windows, and then leave 2/3 of the house original?
There is a massive tree. I don't know if that shows up there.
Yeah, I was looking for a floor plan. The floor plan would help explain it a little bit more, but you're right, it's the,
Trying to preserve a
Great.
huge tree
Yeah.
that compromises our ability to expand the floor plan. So we're having it sort of come out before where the tree is. And I don't know if that addresses.
So the tree's in the back corner. So
Yeah.
if we were to put the bump out, oh yeah, I see the tree here, yeah, thank you.
At least I think that's the issue.
Page 24, I believe, or it's in blue, it's 24 out of the packet.
It looks, the tree that I'm seeing on here looks like it's back at the deck, much further back on the west side of the house.
Yeah, that's right.
So there, where the kitchen is where you're making a bump out for the kitchen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
So could the bump out be pushed back to where the family room is, leave that kitchen area the original plane of the house, so you're not putting that bump out so close to the front of the house? Other than it would screw up everything you've done.
no, I'm just, I'm struggling to understand where it would be. I don't
I'm looking at the floor plan now on page 24 of that.
Sure.
So we'll go ahead and bring that up if you want to wait just a second.
Oh, yeah, of
We can
course.
bring it up.
Okay.
Is it possible to zoom into that main level proposed floor plan? There you go.
Yeah, so where your kitchen is where you're bumping out for the kitchen, correct?
that's correct.
That's pretty much right in the middle of that plane of the south elevation.
Correct, yeah. So, I mean, the approach there was to make sure that the front third of the house kind of preserved its same exterior walls. We felt a little bit more flexibility for the, for the rear 2/3 of the house. And so that's where you get those bump outs. And really, I mean, it was just to get, to achieve a, kind of a functional kitchen within, that space. And still, right now, I mean, there's a lot that goes into these things. The stairs to the basement currently are what you see in Old Town a lot that don't meet code, and headroom issues and turn, and you have to bend your head to go down. So we wanted to develop code compliant stairs in the middle to serve the basement. So that's what kind of started to push the kitchen to the south a little bit more than maybe what would have been needed without the stairs. So.
And I'm a rookie here. This is my first meeting. I'm new with the commission, so bear with me if I'm kind of learning on the roll as we go as far as our parameters of things like this that I believe technically still fall within the rights of what you're looking for.
I actually appreciate that rear southwest corner of the original house maintaining itself and having that addition set back, what, about a foot? I mean, it is minimal, but you do still see the back corner of the main house. I would actually like to see the other corner, the northwest corner, be a little bit more exposed, but I understand.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, that was very purposeful to to highlight that corner of the building, just to, to emphasize that was the original structure and, and to set that back. On the rear addition where the primary bedroom is, the property line is 3 feet north of that, so we couldn't go that way. There's that huge tree that we're trying to preserve, so we didn't really want to go further south, so we were trying to find that happy balance in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are good conversations to have with the architect, so it's good to hash it all out while we're in discussion with him. Were there any questions for the applicant or architect? All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion. And I think it is a good point that we should break it into landmarking and then alteration and grant. So the first thing is the landmarking itself as far as eligibility.
I feel like the property meets the criteria for landmarking. I think it's a great candidate for, given its age, really unique. There's quite a few pyramidal in Louisville, but you don't often see them elsewhere, I feel like. So they really, having a lot of those around town really kind of ties not just that area of Lafarge together, but the overall community together. So that's really special. But I feel it meets all the criteria for landmarking.
Yeah, I would agree. I think even more important after the fire and losing so many historic structures in Superior and knowing this came over from Superior, I think it's pretty cool to try and keep it.
So you want to make a motion to landmark it?
I'll make a motion to landmark 509 Lafarge Avenue.
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wilt. Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Beaucamp.
Yes.
Commissioner Berg.
Yes.
Commissioner Keller.
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden.
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. So we'll move on to the alteration certificate, proposed changes.
That's kind of what we were just discussing. One thing I wanted to bring up regarding not necessarily the footprint, but more so the elevations. Some of the language in our alterations talk about being compatible yet different so that the original structure still stands out. Curious if you've explored possibly changing planes with the fascias rather than just continuing that same fascia line, roof line all the way around. As an architect, always thinking about the energy codes and trying to get insulation in these narrow attic cavities of these older homes. Curious if I'm sure you've given thought to how you're going to achieve R60 in the new additions with the same shallow attic space. I'm sorry,
Oh,
question for
that's
the
fine.
applicant,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fine. Things come up.
Yeah, we've certainly considered all that. Of course, the attic's kind of a piece of cake because there's a lot of space up there, and we aren't changing that. It's just those ends, where the roof meets the wall, where we have more compressed space, and we haven't worked it out yet exactly, but we could use a combination of spray foam and some other more materials that have a higher R per inch.
Right, okay. Did you give any consideration to changing roof lines with the additions just to set it off a little bit from the original home?
Yeah, certainly we did. But we felt that, one of the attempts was to keep it as low as possible, so not to overpower the existing roof, so.
I like how they've transitioned from the horizontal siding on the original structure to the vertical on the addition.
I think the addition has sufficient differentiation so that the landmarked property, the original home, is recognizable, certainly very much so on several facades.
I can respect the windows and the openings and the operations on the front third are trying to be maintained, so I can appreciate that quite a bit. It does give me a little bit of pause with wood. Excuse me again. Just wood as the finish on the exterior portion of that in Colorado. I see the maintenance side of that being a bit hard. Thank you. But I definitely appreciate the again operation and the openings being maintained up there. It does seem a little bit strange to me on the south and north elevation for the front third that the siding seems to be a smaller lap siding, and then all of a sudden you jump to the front proposed east elevation and it jumps to that larger siding. Seems a little odd and like it wouldn't read correctly, but again,
I didn't pick that up. Oh, yeah. So is that graphically correct? Is it going to be a smaller profile horizontal siding on the sides and then a wider profile on the front? Or is it just?
Yeah, and that was the honor, the addition that was made in the 1960s. That was the same time that, or we believe that when the front porch was added. So you feel like, well, if you were to change the siding on the front, you would have to remove the front porch on the front as well if you kind of meet the Secretary of Interior standards. So it was like, well, we want to maintain the front porch, and that has a date associated with that, and then the siding adjacent to it also has that same date. So that was the logic. I mean, you could argue it either way, I suppose, but kind of tells a little bit of the building history, by looking at the building and the siding.
For me, it seems to be a personal choice of which era you're trying to bring it back to on that side of things. There's obviously the larger exposures on there. It did seem, from what, if I remember from one of the other ones, the smaller exposure was definitely in older images. But for me, the oddity was, again, not carrying that same larger portion around for that front third on both sides, where it seemed like that was the same mass of structure, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of an odd building. I mean,
Yeah.
because it did have that smaller side. There's, that smaller siding could be under that larger siding too.
Yep.
And it probably is. But again, that was kind of coming back to the honoring the 1960s edition. So.
Thank you.
So the other thing we mentioned was the addition, one being more of like starting in the middle third of the building, and then it also sticking out to the side. So that's just two things that we kind of need to address as a commission as far as the alteration. So I think as far as location, it obviously changes the roof line on the side. It's not a corner lot, so that is a good thing as far as not being as visible from the street. And then the tree. So that's another, as far as where it's located, it sounds like they put a lot of thought into the location based on lot size and tree and all that. So those are just things to consider. Does anyone have any thoughts on those?
For me, again, I'll stay with that front third remaining the same, it not being on a corner lot. If it was on a corner lot, I would have more hesitation with either of the moves for additions, but with it being, maintaining that front portion, especially the openings and the positions and operation, all that sort of stuff, the porch, which it's been there long enough where I feel like it's part of the house. I think that this is a fine item to take in and consider. I think it does, the vertical siding does speak of a different, materiality for the addition, which is fine. I think it's keeping its height down, so it even though it is, you do probably kind of wish the bump outs were flip-flopped if you could, just so it staggered and stepped back. But again, if this being a center lot and not a corner lot, I think it's a fine move on that front.
Overall, it does seem to pass the test of if you removed the additions, the historic structure is still there intact. You haven't lost the entirety of the historic structure with those additions. So again, it's probably like you were saying on the siding choices. Some of this is just personal, what you'd like to see further up or further back.
And I think the fact that their addition is only 450 square feet, so it's 24% less than zoning, I think that's what they said. Yeah. So, so that there's all kinds of very sensitive thought that's gone into the plan. And I think too, as far as where the bump out is, the stairs, like there's just a lot of moving parts within the house that make sense as to why they kind of arranged it like this. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other alteration questions or discussion or?
No. Make motion.
Then I'd like to make a motion to accept the alteration certificate for 509 Lafarge.
I'll second.
And we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wilt,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Beaucamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right. And then the actual grant request was for $55,000.
Would it be possible to put the table up that you created showing the different HSA suggestions and the different work that's being done? Thank you.
So I believe what's being requested is what we allow as far as the grant amounts. As far as the proposed budget, it's certainly more than meets and matches the grant request. I would, I guess, agree with staff's recommendation that the roof may not be included, but even without it, the budget number is still a matching number to the grant request. So I have no problem with the request.
Right, I agree. When you look at the preservation and restoration grants, especially the work being asked for funds towards in the grant are part of the HSA. A lot of them are structural, they're maintenance, they're things that will keep the house steady and stable in time to come. So I think those all seem reasonable to me.
You want to make a motion for the grant request?
I'll make a motion to approve the grant request for $55,000.
I'll second.
And we'll do a roll call again, please.
Commissioner Wilt,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson, yes. Commissioner Beaucamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right, well, thank you for your presentation and for just your passion for your house. So we, staff will be in touch with just next steps, and Peter obviously knows what to do pretty well. So yeah, we look forward to seeing progress, and just let us know if you have any questions or anything. Thank you.
Best of luck with it.
Thank you.
All right, our next is, we have some discussion items, the HSA grant increases. We'll have a staff presentation.
All right, good evening, Chair Haley, members of the commission, Rob Zuccaro with the Community Development Department. So I have, let's see if I can get this to work here. There we go. So I'm going to go over a little bit of the background again. I know you've, most of the commission's seen this, but we have a new commission member, so I'm going to spend just a little bit more time on the background. But back in October, the commission asked for us to do a review of the HSA grants and the process. And we held that discussion on December 16th, and the commission provided staff direction to look at updating the grants and making some other changes to the process. So we've come back with a recommendation for you to consider this evening, which is a draft resolution that would go to City Council that they could adopt that would amend the funding resolution for HSA grants specifically. Grants in general were a work plan item from last year, so I think there's still intent to review the grant program, but this was something we wanted to do first. I want to point back to that December 16th staff memo. Again, there was quite a bit of background information in that memo about the evolution of the grant program. It was interesting, I think, to note that we received funding around 2008 is when we started collecting funding. The original grant program, we had something called pre-development studies, but they were lumped in with the rest of the grants. We didn't have a special grant just for historic structure assessments. That started in 2012, where we had a grant, but you had to be landmarked first to get that grant. Then in 2014, we allowed those grants prior to landmarking, seeing the benefit of doing it before landmarking. And then in fact, in 2019, when we made the last major updates to the grants, we actually required that you do it prior to landmarking so it could inform the landmarking and the grant process, which typically takes place while you're landmarking. We do have a procedure adopted where we follow a scope of work, which is verbatim from History Colorado. And so we are following that, and this is kind of an overview of our process. We are working with applicants, making sure that the consultant is qualified, reviewing the HSAs before the grants are dispersed. So this is the proposal. We had testimony at the last meeting. We felt like that was a good starting point for the proposal. We didn't have any evidence to change that. Mr. Johnson has done the vast majority of these, so that was really good information to know what these might cost. So we are recommending that the residential grants increase from $4,000 to $7,500 for an HSA, commercial grants from $9,000 to $10,000. I think what you've noticed is when we get these requests, nobody's coming in and saying, well, the consultant's only saying it's going to cost $8,000 for a commercial or anything like that. They're always at the maximum amount. So for various reasons, I think it's good to go up. It's been a while. There's certainly cost increases. So that is the proposal. We did put in extraordinary circumstances in there. We used the same language that we use for extraordinary circumstances for the other grants, which is that there's something unique with building size, condition, architectural details, or other circumstances in relation to a comparable Louisville property. So we should be looking at that and saying, well, what's unique about this if we're going to go over the maximum? So that was the idea. So that if there is a request for extraordinary circumstances, the commission could consider that, and the residential could go up to as much as $10,000, and then commercial up to $15,000. We did put a proposal in there, certainly up for discussion, to require 2 bids if you're going, not for the regular grant, but just if you're doing extraordinary circumstances, just so that there's an additional level of assurance that it is a fair price through at least getting 2 bids. We did specify that the HSA has to be completed by a licensed architect with historic preservation experience. That's been our practice, but we put it in the funding resolution. We did put a requirement, not an option, but a requirement for a licensed structural engineer that can be waived by the commission upon request, but it's a baseline expectation. There's some language in there that doesn't require but encourages additional expertise be brought in, whether it's a mechanical or electrical engineer or other professional with expertise to inform the HSA. We also added, not to the code, sorry, but to the resolution, our current practice of establishing a minimum scope of work and staff reviewing that before disbursement of the grant. So those are all the amendments that are in there, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
With the mechanical and electrical engineers, the second from last bullet point, is that more aimed towards the commercial side of things, or is that?
Probably the way we wrote it in the resolution is we didn't require it that had to be a professional engineer for one, even though that's what it says in the bullet point. And we just put it as encouraged in order to inform the report. So we didn't really, it would most likely be for commercial projects rather than residential, but it could be for either.
Seems like it wouldn't really, you typically come up for a residential one, I would guess. That's why I was asking the question.
Any questions for staff? Are we voting on the?
So yeah, so the resolution is a draft resolution that City Council would adopt. So you can make a motion. I didn't provide a resolution, but you can make a motion to recommend approval of that with or without changes to City Council.
Okay. Yeah, I think this looks really good. I think for the extraordinary circumstances, I like having 2 bids, just to kind of cover our bases as far as.
Sorry.
So I think that's a really good inclusion.
And personally, as an architect and having done dozens of renovations and knowing how much time is involved in just creating the as-built, let alone the additional time needed for the analysis and getting other professionals involved and putting the entire report together, I think this is long overdue. And I would suggest revisiting it every couple years at the least, just to see how things are going.
Do you think the amounts look full right now?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's, I can speak more for the residential side, but certainly the commercial, bumping it up to 10,000 seems fair.
I agree. Looks reasonable to me. It was percentage-wise, it looks like a huge jump on the residential side, but it is well overdue. The amount of work that goes into that is extraordinary.
You feel comfortable with the amounts as well as a professional?
Yeah, I do. I would probably be hesitant to go into the special circumstances portion of it unless it was really, there was something really there that drove me there. But I do believe that the larger jump on the residential side especially is probably warranted. I mean, I wouldn't go any higher than that, just personally, just because you're over doubling it at that point, and it just seems like a larger jump. Now, if it needs to be revisited again, then that would be it, my opinion.
Do you think the 2 bid would help for the extraordinary if that came up?
Again,
I'm up to this point for commercial, but
yeah, I think
HSA.
I don't think it's a unreasonable request, and I think it's a good add.
Although I'm trying to understand how you would get 2 bids if you've got got an architect on the project. Is it just based on the
Right,
size of the project as opposed
Yeah.
to?
Right, so we thought about that, and I think most of your applications, the architect is coming with the request. It doesn't have to happen that way. Again, it's only if it's only if it's extraordinary circumstances. We recognize that isn't how you typically see an application, but that's one of the reasons why we thought this was, it's an interesting discussion point, just to make sure that there's a fair price and we're being responsible with the funds. But that is a potential downside that could cause confusion.
Well, I would imagine if the architect and their structural engineer went and proposed something and they gave us a very high number of like, we need more, they could very easily get someone else to say, here's the circumstances. Do you think this is like based on these properties, like the size?
Yeah, I'm just
foundation,
trying
I
to
don't
think
know.
off the top of my head. I can think of half a dozen maybe properties that might warrant extraordinary circumstances. The church, for instance, was that a residential project? I wasn't involved.
Like Waterloo was a pretty extraordinary, the old Waterloo.
Right.
Um,
That was commercial. But as far as residential,
Oh, you're doing residential. Oh.
I don't know
I
if-
wasn't even thinking residential. I was just thinking it would probably
Yeah.
come up more in commercial. But yeah.
You know, if you're concerned about that, you could say that you have the ability to ask for a second bid when the request comes if you're not comfortable. So that's just an option. I don't know which one's better. It's that has the downside of you're extending somebody's process and then forcing them to go out and get a bid. Might be easier just to ask for it up front and just make it a baseline requirement if you want it in there. So, and then there are if there's more questions, we do have the public, well, at least one member of the public here to speak on it too that might inform the discussion.
Okay. And I guess from a staff's perspective, up to this point, have we had many requests for extra HSA money? I mean, is that something that, as far as extraordinary circumstances, does that come up
So
very much?
no, because we didn't have the option. So we capped it. So if it cost, I did see so when we looked at the HSAs from the last few years, I did find one HSA where it appeared to cost more than the maximum amount for a commercial development. And they noted that it was maybe like $1,000 or $2,000 more than our grant provided. So again, we expect at the city by policy that our grant covers the whole cost. It doesn't always have to be that way either. I provided some information about the state HSA grant process, and they require a minimum match. I think it was 25% for private, and then nonprofit and government, it was a 10% match. So, there's always that idea too, that if we're paying for 80, 90%, that might be enough for some projects as well.
All right. And then if we open up the extraordinary circumstances, would more people have extraordinary circumstances there right now? Or do we just cap it and just leave it like it is? And then, like Marty said, revisit it more often to where we're making sure that we're keeping up with. So just something to think about. Okay. Any other comments or questions for staff? Does it sound all right? Oh. And then do we have any public comment? And if you'll just state your name and city of residence or work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just that sheet, the proposal sheet, that one there. Yeah.
Okay, my name's Andy Johnson, Louisville resident and business owner. I'm going to speak to this on the professional side of what I do here in Louisville as an architect. I think the proposed changes to the HSA I guess, ordinance in terms of the historic preservation section in the code is great. This lines up totally with what we talked about last December. In terms of how you pass this along to City Council, I'd be very willing for you to take the spreadsheet that we did. That was a full accounting of the last number of years of projects with the amount that was charged, as well as the hours that were spent, and what that equated to in terms of a billing rate, if that would be helpful. So that you have my permission on that. I think in terms of residential versus commercial, it's a big jump in residential. I think that it's really difficult to do residential without that, and I think that spreadsheet that I presented in December showed that. It does seem that we are on track with commercial grant, like we're in a good realm. Please expect that you will always get the maximums. It would be weird not to, unless it was just a small project or something that, just maybe, I don't know, didn't fit the typical project. We just don't have that. We have extraordinary circumstances that we typically talk about. I think you're gonna live in these amounts most of the time. I think the extraordinary circumstances, I would add one more characteristic, and that'd be building type. So condition is one thing. Building size is definitely one thing. And that does happen on the commercial side that we've found recently. The things that would be extraordinary would be our extraordinary homes, the ones that are all masonry. We don't have many of those, and they're hard, and they require extra consultants to come in and do mortar testing, brick testing, et cetera. Like there are other steps that have to come into play that extraordinary circumstances could definitely cover. When it comes to requiring 2 bids, I totally understand the due diligence. Good luck. It's going to be really hard to find those 2 bids. We're rarely up against someone else, or same with the previous applicant. That it's sort of, there's just some go-tos and preferences, and I think that that's going to be really hard to get the bids. However, I do think for extraordinary circumstances, it would be very reasonable to expect a number of things. Architectural narrative in terms of what the scope of work would entail, that would be above and beyond a typical HSA. I think that every consultant should have a cost associated with them and a narrative to go with what their scope is that is in addition to. So I would also expect that it would be beyond just the architect and structural engineer to require additional fee. So please consider that. I fully agree with everything else. I think the suggestion of mechanical and electrical is very appropriate. It's a difficult one for residential, as was mentioned. It is something that certainly our firm is considering for all commercial as those come up. And it could simply be just a full kind of accounting of what's there, things that an architect may miss. So I think that those are good things to request. Here's what I do want to offer, though. I think in addition to this, which is great, getting up to speed with current costs, I think that it would be really helpful to re-look at the requirements for HSAs. We have the Department of Interior's list of procedure and items that we go through, but we have worked in our firm to try to set a bar for HSAs. And I think one of the reasons why 2 bids are going to be difficult is that you're not going to have the same product at the end of the day. I think that establishing an updated set of criteria for HSAs that's Louisville specific, that's built off the Department of Interiors, is really important. So when you have an off month and it's kind of like, hey, we don't have to meet, that would be a great thing to talk about. So build your list of those things so when you have a slow month, you can really dig in, because it would be worth it and would create clarity and also the ability for others to do HSAs and not just, kind of the frequent flyers. So happy to answer any questions, but the shot clock didn't go, and I'm pretty sure I went over 3 minutes. So thanks for hanging in there with me.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the staff review prior to awarding the grant is really important, which is obviously more work for staff. But I think, and that might be something that's probably already being done anyway, but I think that is something that the applicant knows is going to happen so that they do a good job the first time. There's not a lot of back and forth or frustration. And then, yeah, if we need to update our requirements, because I think there has been comments about how some are really thorough and maybe some have more lacking. And so again, that's a review for staff, but also direction from us as far as what we expect is really important. So, and it just makes it more fair all the way across the board where everyone's getting paid for the same
service
amount of work. Yeah. Yes.
I mentioned something just about the review because I don't want there to be a kind of a misunderstanding of like how thorough of a review we can do, because that, the scope of work from the state has all of the categories, and I think, from what I can tell, the categories hit most everything. There might be some other things that we would want to add locally. But, when we look at that, we have, as staff, we haven't been, so if there's a structural review and there's an architect and a structural engineer looking at that, we are looking at it to say, yes, they've looked at it and they've made recommendations. We aren't in a position to say they've missed something, they've done that they've done a thorough enough review. We're relying on a professional architect and structural engineer that they've done what they need to do. It's only if it's just fully missing a description of what's happened there. So I just want to make sure when we say that, we need staff to make sure that the qualities are equal.
Right.
I don't know that we'll ever be able to have that exactly, but we can make sure that they at least dress all of the required items and that it appears to be reasonably complete, just for fairness.
Sure, that's good to know. And I guess, too, like maybe, I don't know if it'd be helpful for like us to see like some thorough HSAs versus maybe not so thorough, just to see if we think that we could maybe create more of a template, or does that make sense? Or
right. So you do see all the HSAs when they come back for landmarking. So those, a fair amount don't come back for landmarking. You don't see those. We're happy to share those with you so that you can look through them. Mm-hmm. We can do it all in a study session. And we can give them all to you at once, or we've thought of this over time. Do we want to make it a practice that when staff gets them, we just disseminate it to the entire commission so that you get every one when staff gets them? You're not part of the review process, but then at least you see everything that comes in. We're happy to send that email out, and that might help set a baseline. Mm-hmm. Again, we probably need, I think when we looked back a few years, there were really only 3 architects that you're all familiar with, and Mr. Johnson probably did 90+% of them on top of that. Mm-hmm. So we're not seeing a range, we're not seeing a big range of quality or content outside of what you get from the 3 local architects.
Okay. And that was kind of another side note that I'll just throw in is updating our list of qualified architects and professionals. I know we did that like a long time ago, but is that something else we should?
Yeah, I think the options are just to get rid of the list or make a call. Okay. We could put out a request for qualifications of anybody that wants to be on the list. It says that they have to have experience in historic preservation, but we don't say what that has to be.
Right.
So it's pretty subjective, and we're probably going to accept almost any professional architect that can, give us any licensed architect that can, explain that they've worked on a historic preservation project. It's a pretty low bar. So I think if somebody comes in and if we're not familiar with the architect and they say, hey, here's an architect, I think we'll probably say, hey, make sure they're licensed. We would make sure they have a current license, and then we'd basically put in the record somewhere, get an email from them what their experience is in historic preservation. We'd probably accept them.
Okay.
So I don't know that we need a list. I think the list is more, I think we created the list originally because we wanted people to have resources. So
the list
yeah.
isn't required.
It's
Like,
not
we
required.
don't have to have one.
Yeah.
And I guess most applicants find their way to professionals without a list.
Yeah, it's probably good to have a list for the probably somewhat rare occasion that someone hasn't, received a reference for
Right.
one of our architects that are familiar with the program already, and they're just looking on the website. Helps us too, because we don't want to be in the position of recommending
Right.
someone. So if we just have the problem is you might get a really expanded list, and you'd get, someone who doesn't do as thorough of a job.
Well,
Because
and
they don't know who to pick off of that list.
And it seems like if our list is out of date right now, it could also be frustrating if they
it's-
have no
yeah.
idea and they're calling people who aren't even living
It probably
in the
hasn't been
area.
updated for 10 years.
Right. So
Yes.
that's something we need to
Yeah.
figure out too is we could either scrap the list or add another list or whatever. So that was just a little side note. But okay. So as far as making this something that we send forward to city council, what are we thinking about the way it is, or what changes do we want to make, or?
I think everything that's been proposed is great. A little bit on the fence about the extraordinary circumstances, if that's going to open up a whole nother can of worms and further discussions, but that's for us to discuss and decide if it is extraordinary. Maybe we keep it in.
I think I lean a little more to just not opening that, but I could be persuaded. But especially if we're always going to get the high, like, is that going to just push? I don't know. I just don't know if it's been a big need up to this point. But
I like the idea of getting rid of it as a stated situation and revisit this more frequently than it has been revisited. I don't know how many years it's been since this was changed to 4,000 for whatever it was originally, but if we look at this every couple of years and we're seeing that people are really complaining that, hey, there's no way we can do this for $7,500 anymore, then we know it's time to revisit it. And yeah, why even put it out there? Because I think there it would be like, all right, so 80% of the time they're going to say, oh, it was extraordinary. Well, if it's extraordinary, maybe we need to revisit it. But
so I think it sounds like the amounts are good with everyone.
Yes.
Having to be a licensed architect with preservation, even though we can't necessarily hold them too tightly to that, we can at least try and expect it. And that they also require structural engineer, should be easier to show.
Yes.
And then the standard scope of work, we'll just continue what we are doing at this point and then maybe ramp up what our expectations are as far as more of a formal overview.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So for the extraordinary circumstance, that's the only thing that we're kind of possibly excluding. Does anyone have strong opinions about keeping it in there?
I would To be honest, I would lean towards keeping it in there, but I think it's up to us to hold a certain standard of when it gets applied. I don't think it's a, broad brush, everybody comes in and gets it. And it would have to be something that was, for me, just looking at it right now, you'd have to convince me pretty hard to do it. But I don't mind it's there.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think we get to be the decision maker of what meets that standard, so I would lean towards keeping it.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen that often that I'm aware of.
And it might be something that we would have to revisit again at some other point if we felt it was getting abused. I mean, to be honest, but I think we would have to hold the standard of when it gets to be used and enacted and not. And I can tell you right now, I would lean towards not unless somebody really convinced me of it. There'd have to be something that really pushed me over into that realm.
Right. And I guess if they were to ask for the extraordinary circumstance, would that be a separate hearing? Like, would they come back for more? Because they wouldn't ask for more when they're getting it in the first place.
Right, so I think it could happen in two ways. One is that they come and get the grant, and maybe they haven't hired an architect yet, and then they go out and everything's over the maximum. They could come back and ask for extraordinary circumstances. That would be one good option to be like, well, you only got one bid, come back with two bids. I think that's just a scenario. I think the more likely scenario is they're coming with an architect to request it, in which case, then we'll have a narrative and an explanation. One way or another, we'll have to get a narrative and an explanation of why it's extraordinary from the applicant.
Right. Because I guess I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of, I don't know, just the time and when and we're also potentially setting up for future commissions also. So just kind of thinking that forward momentum of like, do we want to add an extra protocol of maybe having to come back, but they might not ever do it. Like, that's the thing too. It could be in there and then no one ever asks for more HSA. So.
Andy, do you mind if I ask you another question? Yeah, since we've got you here, and since you've done a majority of these, regardless of the grant amount, can you recall in the last 7-8 years or however long, any projects that you would have considered to be extraordinary circumstances over and above the kind of the typical HSA?
That's a good question. I could think of buildings that would qualify for that we haven't studied.
Right.
And we do have a few.
I'm thinking
I would
more
say that
specifically
most
residential.
recently,
Yeah.
most recently, the Methodist Church was, there's more we could have done. We would have liked to have done some destructive testing. Sounds really invasive, but really would have involved digging. It's a next level thing. We need to, we can't do all that work because our insurance won't cover it. If we damage something, that's a problem. But if we had a general contractor be able to come in and do some of that work, for example, find the bottom of a footing or just find if it had a foundation, we could have a more conclusive set of recommendations and report. Yeah, that would probably be the most recent good example.
If you were going to go to that,
that comes up all the time in sometimes small doses, but that's the big one. Yeah.
and if you were going to go to that amount of detail, would going up to $10,000 really come close to, if you're bringing in a contractor and having them dig out and getting to the original footings and things like that, all during the HSA process, I would think that the extraordinary circumstances going up just a couple $1,000, is it really going to cover it? Or are we asking too much during an HSA if we're asking for that type of detail?
Yeah, I think on the residential side, up to 10,000 is probably fine. There are very few circumstances on a residential basis that would happen. I could think of 2 buildings that would probably qualify for that in Louisville. Truly, I think it's really going to be more on the commercial side, and it's going to particularly come up when you have atypical building types, you know, that aren't the moved wood-framed building or, you know, wood-framed building on dirt, you know, that kind of thing that we see all the time. It's going to be the masonry buildings where we may want to do mortar testing in particular. We do this in Boulder all the time, and it's expensive, but you get really good information, and the people who do that work are really good at the forensics of those types of buildings. So, yeah, I agree. I think you need to be picky. I think that this is an extraordinary building, not really an extraordinary circumstance. I guess they kind of go one and the same, but yeah, we really only have a handful of buildings, commercial and residential, that would even qualify for this. So,
You don't think there would be like an overuse of it if we put it in
no,
there?
I don't think so.
Well, people could certainly try, but it would be up to us to
Yeah, okay.
determine.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so it sounds like we're good with extraordinary circumstances. So we'll keep it pretty much as is.
Yeah.
Do we want to keep the requiring 2 bids or just ask for a second, or modify it to ask for a second bid if we have concerns about the first bid? The requiring it might be a bit cumbersome to applicants.
Yeah, I would have to take it out.
Take it out completely or change the wording to
Well,
we may ask for. Be nice or just take it out.
I'm fine with taking it out.
Take out the requirement for the second and just make it the burden of proof on the person presenting to prove that it was extraordinary and needs more money to make this HSA assessment. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as long as we have our architectural experts on the commission, we should be able to figure out if it seems reasonable.
Sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the only change would be that we would take out the required 2 bids.
Sounds good if you just mention that. Whoever makes the
Yep.
motion, if they just mention that, we'll
Okay.
adjust it for city council.
Okay. Any other discussion we need to do before we sit on its way?
No.
Okay. So whoever wants to make a motion, just, that's the only change, is the not requiring 2 bids.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the HSA proposed changes with the exception of removing the requirement for 2 bids to ensure a fair price for an HSA.
I'll second the motion.
We'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wilt,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Bokamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right. And then once it goes to city council, what's the turnaround as far as when we can start implementing it?
It should go into effect immediately since it's just a resolution.
Okay. So by March or
Um,
April for sure, April.
Yes, it would probably be by the end of March.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for synthesizing all that down into, that was great. All right, our next item for discussion is our May landmark ceremony, which is Preservation Month.
Good evening again. Yes, so we have at least one up to 3 new landmarks that would be available for the landmarking ceremony that typically happens in May, so we are going to schedule it as planned. Tonight is just to decide a good date for the landmark ceremony, and nothing else yet. So just historically, last year it was held on May 13th, which was a Monday at 6 p.m. The year before that, it was held on May 25th at 6 p.m., which is a Thursday. And I think a few years before that, it's been held in October. So it's really up to the commissioners what date works best. I will say that the May HPC meeting will be May 19th. And then May 26th, which is a Monday as well, will be closed because it's Memorial Day, so City Hall will be closed. Aside from that, most of the dates are up in the air. It does typically seem like mid to end of May is the common trend in the past few years, but that can change as well.
I think mid-May or even possibly a bit earlier might be better for some commission members here who have school-age children. With the end of May events going on.
It's like the week of 12th or 16th, maybe.
12th or the 5th, you mean?
5th is
Well,
Cinco de Mayo.
I was just saying the week of the 12th or the week of the 5th.
I'm the
yeah.
one that
I was flags all the holidays.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I just said May 5th is Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, that's
Oh.
right. Yeah, we should not be with that.
Does it matter what day of the week? Do we have a preference?
No, and I think we've kept it during the week, and even like Tuesday to Wednesday sometimes keeps people like weekends.
Yeah.
Like Monday, Friday sometimes is harder for people if they're out of town. So that's kind of been some of our criteria is kind of midweek
If we were
evenings.
to do it that week of the 13th, I think you said, maybe that Tuesday, just if we push it later in the week, that we're getting close to the HPC meeting itself, which might be kind of busy for some people. So maybe.
How's the 13th sound? That's a Tuesday.
Since
I'll just mention, sometimes city council members like to attend, and they often have meetings on Tuesday. That's their off week, but they often have a study session or overflow meeting.
How about the Wednesday, the 14th?
Sure.
Since I'm new, I can show my ignorance. What happens at this ceremony?
Well,
What
we
is
do
this?
at your house. Yeah.
We all
When
get
we-
together
That
at
was
the
the-
museum.
that was the.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. That's a good
Okay.
question. That was our
Yeah.
landmark ceremony.
Okay.
That's when we do the presentation of the plaque and then read a little history.
And you do that every month for whatever,
May.
No, every May.
every May for anything for that year.
Start out at the museum, have a little presentation.
Well, that's right. You guys were on a tour. Yeah. I remember now.
Different property.
We did have alcohol at that meeting. Yeah.
So May is Preservation Month, and so we decided this would be an easy annual event where we can give all the plaques and kind of make it more of a community event.
Gotcha.
Yep. Sorry not to explain.
Okay, I'm with you now.
So Wednesday the 14th, what are you going to say?
I believe that works.
Works for me.
At 6 o'clock p.m. still works? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
So apparently our bronze plaque vendor went out of business, so if anybody knows any good
And we don't
bronze
have
plaque vendors,
there's no other
I'm sure, we haven't looked yet, but
good
I
niche.
imagine it's a bit of a specialty, so if anybody's
Right.
ever gotten a bronze plaque, let us know. We'll be starting from scratch.
Yeah, the supplier that went out of business said they would contact us with a recommendation for a new supplier that has yet to happen, and it's been a couple months.
Wonder
So
if
we'll start
other-
looking.
I wonder
for
if other municipalities that landmark might have some leads.
That's a good idea.
Were you able to get the one fixed before they went out of business? Did they?
No,
No. Okay.
no, I did not.
That was scarce. Yeah. All right. We'll do some research. And then two, we need to coordinate with the, make sure that the museum doesn't have anything going on that night if we want to use that space like we have. So, which isn't,
We'll double check other events and then confirm the date here soon once we ask around, make sure there's no other conflicts.
okay. All right. And then next is items from staff. So the 2025 meeting dates.
Yes, so I don't have a slide for that, but in your staff meeting packet, you can find the 2025 meeting dates. No action is required for that. It's just for your knowledge as well. In the packet, you can find the open government pamphlet for your review as well. And then updates, there were no alteration certificates to update you on. We had 2 demolition reviews. One was for 623 McKinley Avenue for a new front window that was released. And the second was for 945 Caledonia Street, included several exterior changes and some additions. And this will be brought to the full HPC hearing at the next meeting. And other than that, the next meeting is Monday on March 17th at 6:30. Just a heads up, just to note, this meeting will include a roadshow of our comprehensive plan updates and discussion.
It's on St. Patrick's Day too. Oh, is that what you were saying?
The last time it came up, I said that, and everybody was like, yeah.
It's funny. We can all wear green. And then we have the trainings that, like the open government training that we have to do every so many years. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think
Do
it's a
we know-
2-year cycle.
Yeah, I feel like some of us might be up for that.
Okay,
Do we
yeah, the
know-
city clerk usually sends out notices.
Personal. Okay, That's
We
great.
can definitely check, but.
that's fine.
Yeah.
We can. I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't something that. Okay. Great.
And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any updates from commission members? We obviously have a new commission member, so welcome. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you.
And thanks for jumping in there tonight. Sometimes it takes a while for some of us to warm up to jumping in there, so you did awesome. So it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other updates?
Nope.
All right.
I'll make a
Item. Do it.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Yep.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Have a great night.